I'm Kat.
I'm Rachel.
We are the Pandemonium.
Operator error. Not a Pandemonium podcast if something doesn't go wrong. It is usually operator error. I'm offended. I didn't say which operator. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's you. It's not letting me mute it now. What the hell? Weird. Well, while Kat sorts herself out, my shirt, Camp Boggy Creek, is a hole-in-the-wall camp that lets children with disabilities come stay for a week or a weekend free of charge. All they have to do, I think, is find a way to transport themselves to and from camp, and the camp takes care of the rest of it. Should be back in a second, guys. So Paul Noonan, the guy that has all the salad dressings and stuff. So
Newman's Own?
Yes. So a large chunk of that proceeds go to these specific, they're literally called hole-in-the-wall camps. And they're self-funding. I know there's one in Central Florida, Boggy Creek. There's only like a handful of them, but Dr. Sister volunteered a summer there, and I went and stayed with her. I went and visited her for like a weekend, and it was just so cool. And I love the fact that the proceeds that come from Newman's Own goes to the camp.
They have something similar in California for Newman's Own. There's a few different states that they do it in, but they have one which is called it. My goddaughter called it the nightlife camp because she has that weird disability where the sun actually blisters her skin. So she can't go outside. I can't remember the name. I'll write it down later. I'll put it up. She would go to this camp. And it was literally, they did everything at night. They did night hikes. And it was so bright there. So they had like as many lights as possible. And then during the day, all of the camp sheds that they slept in had those room darkening covers. And I was like, this is the coolest thing on the planet. So I fully support that. We will send me the link and I will put it on this episode.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I just like each week would be like during the summer, each week would be a different disability, cleft palate, heart issues. It would just be different things. And the parents could come too. And I think it was ages from, I think it's like 5 or 6 to 17. And so parents could come and like usually for the weekends, parents could come and stay in adult cabins while their kids were staying in kid cabins. And they just were able to bond with people that were similar to them. And the parents would create bonds because there's other parents dealing with the same things. And it was just really cool.
I love that.
A little lightheartedness before the topics of today.
The schmurder. Rachel's taking this, I think, maybe this whole month off because it's been hard. Work's been hard.
It's been very hard. It's spring break, or we're getting close to the tail end of spring break, and it's been rough, guys.
That's being nice about it.
So I just looked it up. Group itself is called Hole in the Wall Gang Camp. It's a nonprofit 501c3 organization. Residential summer camp.
Hole in the Wall Gang Camp, like G-A-N-G?
Yeah.
Badass.
So it's a nonprofit residential summer camp and year-round center. But yeah, they started, or Paul Newman founded it in 1988 so that children with small illnesses could just be kids and raise a little while experiencing diverse and transformational friendship that go hand in hand with the camp.
Okay, so earlier, I don't know if you saw my faces. The faces I was making was because my screen would not let me hit pause, which we don't have anymore, but like the mute button or like the moving of screens or anything. And I was like, son of a biscuit, because I can't. So I had to use my little toggle switches and turn off the mic and be able to clickety clack, clack, clack over here. And then I had to skip out and then come back in. And not a Pandemonium podcast if something doesn't go wrong.
Absolutely not.
Speaking of, we have new merch dropping, I think, in April and in May. I think we have 2 different things that she's making. But Michaela ordered a shirt, so I can't wait for her to get it and send us the picture. And then we're getting our shirts here soon. So hopefully, I think you said you're getting yours in the next couple of days.
That is correct.
Let me look when I'm getting mine. Date. It just says it's in process.
Rude.
I know. So, are you ready today?
Yes, but no.
She already knows what today is. I decided to do research on this, and it's one of her topics. I stole it. So sorry, not sorry.
Listen, I appreciate all the help. I need all the help.
I will give you all of the help whenever you need the help. So whatever you need. As Gilmore Girls always said, I will be there. Also, that show is horrible for relationship dynamics, if you think about it.
Definitely.
I know somebody who's absolutely obsessed with that show, and I was like, it's a great show. I watch it every fall. It's my thing. I watch that every fall. That's my comfort show. For Sydney, it's Grey's Anatomy, and I can't.
This is a Pandemonium Witches podcast. Trigger warning. The following episode contains graphic violence and gruesome depictions. Listener discretion is advised.
The case we're talking about today has been featured on podcasts such as Last Podcast on the Left, Serial Killer and Murderous Minds, Sisters of the Strange, Murder Podcast, Morbid, Lights Out, Tom Zenner, Double Loop, our queen, of course, Bailey Sarian, with Murders, Mystery, and Makeup Monday, and a lot more, because this Cornflake Unaliver is quite popular in pop culture. We're still going to cover this case, even though it's been everywhere, all over the media. So too long didn't read. Ricardo Leyva Munoz Ramirez, better known as Richard Ramirez, was an American cornflake unaliver, schmex offender, and burglar whose unaliving spree occurred in the greater Los Angeles and San Francisco Bay Area in the state of California from April of '84 to August of '85. Ramirez unalived at least 15 people during various break-ins, with his crimes usually taking place after dark, leading him to be dubbed as the Night Stalker, the Walk-In Killer, and the Valley Intruder. He was convicted and sentenced to be unalived in 1989 and subsequently died, awaiting execution in 2013. Nothing to say?
I was just letting you go with the TLDR.
Ready to get into it?
As ready as I'll ever be.
I can't send this to you and I can't show you. I just realized I was muted that whole time. My little no-no, my little Lenora, loves my face whenever I send pictures or videos. So she stares at it and tries to grab the phone. Oh, that's so adorable. No loves her grandma.
As she should.
Yes. I'm saving that in my Snapchat. I will show you after. So today we're going to be talking about Richard Ramirez, aka the Night Stalker, born February 29th, 1960 in El Paso, Texas. Zodiac is the Pisces, which is imaginative, compassionate, and intuitive, but on the other hand can be manipulative, possessive, or excessively stubborn, especially when pursuing stability when feeling insecure. So he's one of those guys that's like an alpha bro.
Just ew.
Also, if you're single and you're mingling and somebody comes up and claims that they're an alpha, they're not. They don't ever say, my husband is 100% an alpha male. Like, he does not act like it. He is 100% an alpha male, because alpha males respect their females. Number one. Number two, they don't have to project that they're better than everybody else. They just know. And number three, if anybody says I'm an alpha male, be like, oh, like furries? You're welcome.
Thanks.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
Absolutely hilarious.
Come to me for more dating tips. So anyways, his nickname today is not going to be Richard. It's going to be Ricky. Not Ricky Ricardo, not Ricky Martin, just Ricky. Like Cher, but without the fabulous hair or the legs and more psychosis. Good old Ricky was born in El Paso, Texas on February 29th, 1960 to Mexican immigrants Mercedes Munoz and Julian Tapia Ramirez, the youngest of 5 children. His father was a railway laborer and a violent alcoholic who was prone to fits of anger that often resulted in physical abuse towards anyone in the household. Ricky was brought up Catholic, and he began smoking garden herbs and drinking alcohol at the age of 10.
The devil's lettuce.
Gardening.
I was about to say, you're still muted. I wasn't sure if you're talking to me or not.
I'm supposed to know when he's kicking, but I don't have an app for that, so I'm just going to download it.
Do daily tallies.
All right. Sorry about that. Psychiatrist Michael Stone describes Ricky as a quote-unquote made psychopath, as opposed to a born psychopath, which is differences like Jeffrey Dahmer, the people Dahmer, Ed Gein, that kind of thing. He said that Ricky's schizoid personality disorder contributed to his indifference and the suffering of his victims and his untreatability, which he never sought treatment for any of his mental disorders, which he had quite a few. I had to put both of my feet on the pedestal you bought me.
That thing is coming such great handy.
So handy. It's got a little storage thing in it where all of my wigs are, which I don't bring them out all that often, but, you know. So Dr. Stone stated that Ricky was knocked unconscious and almost died on multiple occasions before he was even 6 years old. And as a result, later developed temporal lobe epilepsy, aggressivity, and hypersexuality due to his knocks on his noggin. At the age of 12, Ricky was taken under the wing of his older cousin, Miguel Mike Valles, a soldier in the U.S. Army who he himself had become a cornflake unaliver and rapist during his service in the Vietnam War.
Listen, I'm not saying it's all service members, but the number of former service members that we've covered on this podcast is far too many.
Well, and they've been thinking about removing some of the mental health questions that they have to answer, which,
if anything, I feel like we need more.
Well, yeah, and Josh and I had a huge discussion about that because Josh is a service member, and he's like, they should be doing more. And I was like, they should. They don't. It's alleged that that cousin Mikey often boasted of committing gruesome and absolute heinous war crimes in Vietnam and shared Polaroid photos with good old Ricky showing women who he had, I'm just going to say, violated, because a good portion of them were Belinda, as it were, along with other violations that he did, which he took photos of, like steps that he did. It's alleged that many of those photos depicted them being tied to trees or wooden posts before or after they were assaulted and unalived by cousin Mikey. Ricky later stated while incarcerated that he was absolutely fascinated rather than repulsed by the images and stories that cousin Mikey had shared with him. So Mikey taught Ricky some of his military skills, including, direct quote, stealth and kill tactics. Absolutely not. Around this time, Ricky began to seek escape from his father's violent temper by sleeping in a local cemetery. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I've slept at a cemetery. For me, it's calm. For instances like this, it is creepy. Reason why I say creepy: his father often tied him to a crucifix in the cemetery overnight as punishment.
The what? I'm sorry. I feel like there was a car key in my ear. Could you say that again, please?
His father often tied him to a crucifix in the cemetery overnight as punishment.
I've never been so glad that people were dead, because otherwise I'd have a few words with this father. Maybe with a crucifix.
Oh, yeah. His dad was
A number?
So shortly after Ricky turned 14 in 74, he began using LSD quite frequently. He and cousin Mikey resumed bonding over the shared use of illicits and alcohol. And during that period, Ricky began to cultivate an interest in Satanism and the occult. Guys, it's not how Satanism works.
It definitely is not.
They're very much about consent and knowledge. And I mean, if you want to go look at the Church of Satan website, it's quite informative. And when I studied religious and ethics in college, I thought it was fascinating learning about Satanism, because the correlations between Catholicism were they weren't obscure at all. I mean, they were very much like treat your neighbor well. Really, Satanism, treat your neighbor well. Don't do anything without permission. Oh, really? Don't do anything without permission. It's literally the core basics of Catholicism. But that's a topic.
We could be here all day with that.
You know me with religion. So when he reached adolescence, Ricky began to meld his burgeoning schmexual fantasies with real big violence, including forced murder, mutilation, and rape. As a teenager, he frequented by hunting coyotes, rabbits, and birds with his father's .22 rifle in the El Paso desert at night. He would often disembowel them, feeding their entrails to a family dog. Still in school, he took a job at a local Holiday Inn and used his master key to steal from sleeping patrons while they were in their room. At least on one occasion, Ricky assaulted 2 children in an elevator at the hotel, but he never reported or was prosecuted for this act. His employment ended abruptly after Ricky attempted to violate a woman in her hotel room and was caught in the act by the victim's husband. Although the husband beat Ricky at the scene, criminal charges were dropped when the couple, who lived out of state, declined to return to Texas to press charges against him and testify.
It's always the people that end up dropping charges because they don't want to pursue it or take it to trial or do the things. Listen, if you had done this, he would have been caught a lot sooner and so many more people would have been alive. Always pursue the charges.
Okay, so May 4th, 1975, National Star Wars Day. You guys didn't know that. At the age of 15, Ricky was there when cousin Mikey fatally wireless hole punched his second wife, Jessie, in the face during a domestic argument. Like the graphic photos and stories of his cousin's war crimes in Vietnam, Ricky later remarked similarly that witnessing the unaliving was not traumatic for him in any sense, but rather a subject of fascination, and he wanted to see it again. After the pew-pewing, Ricky became sullen and withdrawn from his family and peers and began increasingly committed burglaries and getting illicit narcotics.
It's always the drugs.
Yeah. As someone who used to partake very much. Cousin Mikey was found not guilty of Jesse's unaliving by reason of insanity, and with the pew-pewing attributed to post-traumatic stress disorder from his military service in Vietnam. Ricky dropped out of Jefferson High School in the 9th grade and shortly before the year ended in 1977. So former teachers and classmates of Jefferson High later reported that Ricky was essentially a troublemaker known for his truancy and that he was bullied by other students. Shortly after the pew-pewing, he moved in with his older sister Ruth and her husband Roberto. Roberto was an obsessive peeping Tom who took Ricky along on his nocturnal exploits.
Of course he did.
He goes from one bad to another. So again, 1977, cousin Mikey was released from a mental institution, and he sometimes accompanied Ricky and Roberto on their voyeuristic walks, spying on women in the nearby areas through their windows. This is why we have blackout curtains and locks.
Among other things.
There's not a lot of information from 1977 to 1982. And this is really kind of where it starts to ramp up for good old Ricky. Because if you thought he was just sitting idly by, you'd be wrong. So in 1982, at the age of 22, he moved and settled permanently into California. It was around this time that he began to use nose candy and quickly became his substance of choice. Because believe it or not, when you're an addict, you do have a substance of choice. Mine was pills. It was easier to get for me anyways, especially where I live. I've been sober actually for December. December is going to be 23 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's even hard for me to take a Tylenol. I take my daily multivitamins and stuff like that, but like Rachel knows, I will not take a Tylenol unless absolutely necessary.
But lately, sometimes it's more necessary than not. Because all the kicking.
My God. We have a soccer player living in here. So Ricky began to commit theft and burglaries to get more money for sustaining his addiction. He lived nomadically between San Francisco and LA County during this time prior to his incarceration. We've talked about this on numerous episodes. It's not San Fran. It's not Frisco. It's San Francisco or SF. Don't ever call it Frisco or San Fran. You will get mugged.
I can't say San Franny.
You can, but you'll get mugged if you're there.
Sandy Franny.
So April 10th, 1984, this is the first time that Ricky had unalived someone. So before I get into it, we're going to take a pause. Rachel, she's going to get prepped, and then we're going to go into it.
I was about to say, you muted yourself like in the middle of your conversation. Not the photos.
All right. So I sent them in groups. So the first one are the individual victim photos, and the second one is the victim's lineup, which we do whenever there's a cornflake unaliver that unalives more than 5 people. I do put them in a victim lineup. And these are people who have survived and unfortunately subsequently died. But the first one is going to be the hardest out of this entire episode, which is why I told her she needed to take a minute. So, you ready?
No, but we're going ahead anyways.
Wonderful. Love the enthusiasm. So, we hate this, but this is for the victims, not for him. I do go into the details, but I mainly do a lot more details for the victims. The first one was very hard for me to do any research for her. I couldn't find anything. That's how young she was. The first one is May Young. So it's pronounced Young. It's Leung. Ricky unalived May, a 9-year-old girl, in the basement of her apartment building in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. The Tenderloin district is also known as the meatpacking district in New York or Florida, the larger cities where all the meat packers are at. Tenderloin is the most inexpensive place to live in San Francisco, at least at that time. May was with her 8-year-old brother looking for a lost $1 bill when Ricky approached her and told her to follow him into the basement to see if he can help her to find it. May Shan Linda Young was born on August 3rd, 1974 in China. First, it's important to understand the layout of the building, which functioned as a residential hotel, kind of like how the Cecil Hotel was back in the day. The so-called basement wasn't actually underground. It sat at street level. It could be accessed through 2 garages, a standard door, and a main entrance, reached by climbing a set of exterior steps that led to the lobby. From that lobby, there was also direct access to the basement. You know when you sneeze and it sounds like a grown man?
Yes. Usually my back ends up popping with those sneezes.
My back has not popped with my sneezes, but it does when I turn over, because I am essentially a rotisserie chicken after 10 p.m.
I mean, you're tan and delicious and juicy. I mean, there's worse things to.
We are not people nommers, okay? That's called cannibalism and is illegal in 20 states.
Pretty
Yes,
sure your
pretty
husband
sure
would beg to
would beg to-
differ, but that's besides the point.
Rachel!
What?
This is not that kind of program.
You know, our listeners can come up with their own things in their minds. Imagination is free.
Listen, Bob Ross, this is not Reading Rainbow, all right? Okay?
2 different shows, ma'am.
They were both funded by PBS. So anyways.
Fair.
So the space itself was essentially a long corridor stretching from the front to the back, lined with large bins serving the 33 cramped living units packed into the structure alone. So this is kind of like the Great Depression apartment buildings, like I was telling you about. 2 families were actually living on the basement level, and it was one of them, not May Young's little brother, who discovered her body. It is believed that May and Michael, her brother, began making their way up to this level. On the first floor, the building's apartment manager, Alice Kwan, later reported hearing 2 children arguing on whether or not to take the elevator or the stairs to the 4th floor, which was the very top of the building. Michael chose the elevator, leaving his little sister to take the stairs alone. At the time in 1984, there were no reports of a dollar bill drifting down into the basement below. About a half hour later, sometime between 7 and 7:50 p.m., May's brother, Yugin, asked Michael to go look for her, assuming she was still somewhere in the building. But when Michael reached the 1st floor, he was met by police officers who told him to, quote, go back upstairs. The basement was already sealed off as a crime scene. Once they were in the basement, now you can look at the last photos I sent you. Ricky had abused, throat hugged, and violated May before knifing with a switchblade and hanging up her partially covered body from a pipe fire blouse. From what I did read when I was researching this, a lot of the cops' reports and patrolman reports stated it was the most horrific scene they had ever seen in their entire life. And I have to agree. Like, doing the research that we've done, this unsettled me more than it should have. But I think it's also because of the pregnancy hormones. The unaliving was not originally linked to Ricky until 2009. The DNA that was found at the crime scene on a handkerchief was matched to Ricky. In the San Francisco Chronicle, a 50-year-old man who lived on the basement level with his 2 preschool-age daughters, claims his children found Mae Young's body a few feet from their door. The area in which she was found is referred to as the basement garage. On May 5th, 1984, the San Francisco Examiner stated she was wedged in some overhead pipes. So you're seeing that the stories aren't really matching. Later that year, the same paper repeated that she had been wedged into a maze of overhead pipes in an attempt to hide her. Seeing as she had been knifed, it was likely that the blood dripping from her gave away her location, although it was never stated publicly. It is if you look in the case documents. There is no mention of Mae Young being found suspended from a spigot like Jesus, despite later claims. That is a direct quote from the police document. While her blouse was throat-hugging her neck, the details often repeated in retellings don't appear in the original documents of the court transcripts, nor of the actual police crime scene details. And the coroner never established a definitive cause of death, although it was documented that she had been knifed multiple times in the back. There was also nothing to suggest a connection to the occult or anything satanic, which is what a lot of his later unalivings were attributed to. At the time in the U.S., it was deep in the quote-unquote satanic panic events when even the faintest hint of ritualistic or satanic elements would have been sending the media into an absolute frenzy. In this case, no claims surfaced, and the more sensationalized details seem to have emerged much later, around 2009, likely in an effort to bolster the controversial DNA link to Richard Ramirez. Alice Kwan was again quoted stating that the residents no longer want to throw garbage away, and that means that the basement and its bins that were in frequent use by all of the families were left untouched. The unaliver must have been very quick and therefore familiar with the building and knew how to escape, because it didn't have the same layout as other buildings in the area, so he had to know the building. Nobody reported a child screaming, so she must have been silenced somehow or lured by someone she had trusted. By the end of the month, detectives Mullane and Schneider stated that there were no suspects to this crime.
I thought you first for a moment. You were so still.
I'm catching my breath.
Listen, he needs to quit tap dancing on your diaphragm.
It's my lungs, man. Although I'm very much looking forward to lunch, because we had chicken tortellini Alfredo last night. It was so good, and I combined 4 cheese Alfredo with roasted garlic Alfredo.
Okay.
If you don't know the recipe, it's super easy. You take chicken breast, you cut it up into teeny tiny little cubes, and you marinate it on the counter 2 hours before you cook it. So it gets to room temperature. You just put it in a bowl. You're giving me that face.
I'm intrigued, and I'm just like, but what do you marinate it in?
Olive oil and garlic Parmesan Kinder seasoning. Okay, but wait.
There's more.
Yes, Billy Mays here. So what you do is you get not the pre-cooked tortellini, but it's the frozen tortellini. All you do is add water to cook it. Toss that sucker in the microwave for 5 minutes. You do 4 scoops. I do hand scoops. 4 hand scoops of the tortellini. Cook that in the microwave for 5 minutes while you're cooking the chicken. That cools down. Your chicken's almost done. You cook it to brown. Finish off with a little white wine and some butter. Okay? Then you mix in the tortellini and the Alfredo sauce and 2 handfuls of cheese. Meanwhile, at this point, the oven is already pre-baked to 425. You put a layer of cheese. You put your layer of tortellini, chicken, cheese, Alfredo mixture, and then you put a layer of cheese on top. When I tell you this thing is delicious, I don't care that I am allergic to dairy, not lactose intolerant. I am straight allergic to dairy. You should hear the sounds my body makes. It sounds like a garbage truck coming through on Depot Day. I don't care. It was delicious. So you put it in the oven at 425 for 25 minutes. You broil it for the final 5 minutes. That thing comes out, chef's kiss. And yes, I am freezing some of that, and we're making some of it for you when you come to visit.
Oh, good. I was going to say, can you write that and write it down and send it to me later? Because I'm going to forget by the time we get done with this.
It's so freaking good, dude. But I get the stuff that's on sale, like the Classico, the large jars. So I get the large jar of 4 cheese, and then I get the smaller jar of the garlic. I do more of the 4 cheese than the garlic. Heavy breathing. So anyways, May of 1984, this is after the whole incident with Mayung. A description was given to the San Francisco Examiner of good old Ricky. White male, about 5'10", medium build, clean shaven, brown hair, side parted, slightly over the ears, who, according to an article in 2009 edition of Central City Extra magazine, was seen in the building's elevator, but it was not stated by who. 2 months after the unaliving of May, Ricky initiated a series of violent home invasions that sparked the original panic of LA and then later San Francisco. Go ahead and go to the slides of the victim lineup. June 28th, 1984, we meet 79-year-old Jenny Gerber Vinkow. She was born December 9th, 1985 in the United States. And Jeannie was found unalived in her apartment in Glassell Park, Los Angeles. She had been knifed repeatedly in the head, neck, and chest while asleep in her bed, and her throat cut so deeply she was nearly blind. Ricky's fingerprint was found on a mesh screen he removed to gain access through an open window. This and his second unaliving is his first known one, establishing his pattern of committing particularly very vicious unalivings, frequently burglarizing the homes of his victims either before or after unaliving them, which mainly to support his opiate addiction and to pay his rent, because boy did not have a job. His next brutal attack would not be until almost 9 months later. All the while, in February and March of 1985, there was a series of child abductions in Montebello, Monterey Park, and Glassell Park. All of the children were violated and then abandoned. One of those children was 6-year-old Anastasia Horonas. She and the other children provided police with the description of their kidnapper that raised alarms with them and inspired a hunch for one of the homicide detectives. Meet Detective Gil Carrillo. Say that 20 times fast. Gil Carrillo. Detective Gil spotted similarities between the children's descriptions and the one given by Maria Hernandez, which we'll talk about later. As recounted, if you have not seen the documentary on Netflix, Night Stalker, The Hunt for a Serial Killer, fabulous documentary. He thought that just maybe all of those crimes were committed by one man because that's the description that she gave. So, March 17th, 1985, Maria Hernandez was attacked. Maria entered the garage of a Rosemead condominium, and a man dressed in black suddenly pointed a .22 wireless hole puncher at her head. He fired close range. She survived when the bullet ricocheted off her keys, which she held in her hands when she lifted to protect herself. Miraculously, the bullet struck the keychain she was holding, deflecting the shot and leaving her only slightly injured. She collapsed and played unalived. Believing she was already deceased, he stepped over her and entered the house. This is where we meet the next 2 fatal victims. Inside her house, her roommate, 34-year-old Dale Yoshi Akazaki, heard the gunshot and ducked behind the counter when she saw Ricky enter the kitchen. Born on April 1st, 1950 in Hawaii, there isn't a ton about her, but I did end up finding some really nice photos of her, so I put those in. When she raised her head to get a good look at what happened, Ricky, who was waiting for Azaki to peek over the counter, pew-pewed her once in the forehead, unaliving her instantly. Within an hour of the Rosemead attack, Ricky pulled Cy Leanne Veronica Yu out of her car in Monterey Park and pew-pewed her twice with a .22 caliber wireless hole puncher and fled. He was born March 3rd, 1955 in Taiwan and was a student at the Art Center of College of Design of Pasadena. She was pronounced DOA at the hospital, and she was only 30 years old at the time. Wrong button.
I was like, you were gone, and then you're back.
I have to remember to breathe.
Breathing is very important, ma'am. We need you to keep doing that.
I'm trying.
I know.
It's hard.
Especially when the trees are pollinating.
All of the trees are mating. My entire car is covered with yellow pollen.
My red vehicle is orange.
My gray vehicle looks white, which he's just like, your car looks so dirty. And I was like, it's just pollen.
Because it is. With pollen.
With 2 unalivings and an attempted third in a single day, it attracted so much media coverage. They dubbed the attacker, described as curly-haired, bulging eyes, and wide-spaced, quote, rotting teeth. They called him the walk-in killer or the valley intruder. Of course, after Ricky fled, Maria ran outside and contacted the police. Because remember, he fired, but he didn't actually injure her. She provided a clear and detailed description of the man, his clothes, his build, his face, and her testimony became the first solid lead in a growing series of violent crimes across California. Both Maria and the abducted children described their attacker as tall, light skin, with brown-stained teeth, a pungent odor, and a member-only style jacket. So Detective Carrillo took his suspicions to fellow homicide detectives. Only a few days later, 10 to be precise, we have our next 2 victims. Meet Vincent Charles Zazzara and his wife Maxine Lavinia Tedder Zazzara. Vincent was born October 8th, 1920 in La Callia, Provincia de La Callia, Abruzzo, Italy. I learned how to pronounce it just for this. Maxine was born May 15th, 1940 in West Memphis, Crittenden County in Arkansas. Approximately 2 a.m., Ricky entered a home that he had burglarized a year earlier, just outside of Whittier, and unalived 64-year-old Vincent Charles Zazzara in his sleep with a wireless hole puncher to the head. Vincent's wife, 44-year-old Maxine Lavinia, was awakened by the wireless hole puncher. So Ricky abused her, bound her hands, while demanding to know where the valuables were. That was a grown man burp that just escaped me. I am so disgusted.
I mean, of course it was a grown man. You're growing a little boy, so I mean, it only makes sense that your body function reacts as such.
Right. By the way, with how many Richards we covered, Richard was the first name we pulled off the list for boys. I was like, no, no Ted.
Nope, too many.
No. I mean, Teddy is still on there because I love Teddy Roosevelt. Main reason. But that's it. So while Ricky was ransacking the home, Maxine escaped and retrieved a shotgun from under the bed, but it wasn't loaded. So she turned and pulled the trigger, and Ricky turned and saw her and laughed. And he ended up getting furious and taking his wireless hole puncher and unaliving her. Then he fetched a large carving knife from the kitchen. I'm just going to say he mutilated her body. This is where the satanic panic starts to come in. He cut an inverted cross into her chest, removed her eyes, and then placed them in a jewelry box. He attempted to have relations with her, but found himself so shaken by her attempting to pew-pew him that he was unable to achieve, as I put, a standing ovation. Because the word I had to put in was not the right word I could use.
So when that happens, we get creative with words.
hence wireless hole puncher. And plastic swipes.
The swoopy swappies.
The swippy swipes. So he then took the jewelry box containing her eyes and kept it at his apartment as a souvenir until after his arrest. Ricky left footprints from a pair of Avia sneakers in the flower beds, which police photographed and then cast. Bullets found at the scene matched those found at previous attacks, and police determined that a cornflake unaliver was at large. So Detective Carrillo went to his mentor, fellow detective Frank Salerno, with his hunch about this just being one person versus a multitude of people. Detective Salerno said it was unheard of for a criminal to have such a wide range of types, men, women, children, and such varied methods of killing, varied methods of unaliving. Ricky had used wireless hole punchers and knives interchangeably at this point. By the late spring of 1985, Detective Carrillo learned of another shoe print that might link the unalivings to the child abductions. A child was taken from the Montebello area and assaulted at a nearby construction site. The cement at the site was still wet, and the print was extremely similar to the one found at the Zazzara home. Soon after, Carrillo and Salerno became partners, and by that time, there had been yet another attack on May 14th, 1985. Meet 66-year-old William Makoto Bill Doi and his 56-year-old wife, Yuriko Lillian Kita Doi. Bill was born December 1st, 1919 in California. This part got me too. Not as bad as Mae Young did, but it still got me. Bill had been in a Japanese relocation camp during World War II, and he later joined the highly decorated the 442nd U.S. Army Regimental Combat Team. He retired from his sales job with Santa Fe Trucking and loved to dote on his 4-year-old grandson. Lillian was born August 30th, 1921 in Japan. She, too, was one of the Japanese Americans relocated during World War II from 1942 to 1946. She had one sister named Alice, and Ricky returned to Monterey Park and entered the home of the Doys. They surprised Bill in his bedroom. Ricky wireless hole punched him in the face with a .22 after Bill went for his own wireless hole puncher. After beating Bill unconscious, Ricky entered Lillian's bedroom. They had 2 separate bedrooms, which is common in Japanese culture, by the way. He ended up binding her with thumb cuffs and then violated her and then ransacked the home for valuables. Bill succumbed finally to his injuries at the hospital. May 29th, 1985, which is just, again, a few days later, we have 83-year-old Mabel Ma Bell and her disabled sister, 81-year-old Florence Nettie Lang. These were both women of color. And I'm noticing more and more a lot of the people that he attacked are POC. Just a mere 2 weeks later, Ricky drove a stolen car to Monrovia, and stopped at the house of Mabel and Florence. Finding a hammer in the kitchen, he hit and bound Nettie in her bedroom, and then bound and hit Mabel before using an electric cord to shock the women. After assaulting Nettie, he used Mabel's lipstick to draw a pentagram on her thigh, as well as the walls of both the bedrooms for the women. The women were found 2 days later alive but comatose and critically injured. Unfortunately, Mabel died in the hospital from her injuries just on July 15th. Nettie unfortunately died in August, a little while later, from complications due to her injuries. There's a lot of information on this, guys. I'm trying to go through it quickly. But as you can see, it's hard for me to breathe. From the 21st...
And it's hard for me to process all of it because it's just hard. Things are hard.
Things are hard. Do you need a minute?
No, keep going.
Okay. We're going to steamroll through this. Okay. From the 21st to the 30th of May, Richard Ramirez was a very busy man because he also had his quote-unquote routine life. So he had dental appointments, traveling to El Paso and back for his dental visits, after attending the first communion of his niece, along with his continuing unaliving spree. So he's had quote-unquote alibis. He did not have alibis. May 30th, 1985, we have Carol Kyle and her son. There wasn't a lot of information I could find because they're still both living, but I did find some. The next day, Ricky drove a car to Burbank and snuck into the home of 42-year-old Carol Kyle and her son. At approximately 4 a.m., Carol was awoken in her home by a flashlight being shown in her face and a small, dark steel wireless hole puncher being pointed at her head. He said, "Get up, don't make any noise," and told her to move into the living room. She indicated that her son was in the house. They went to her son's bedroom. The man turned on the light, waking him up. He then told both of them not to look at him as he left the room, and he started ransacking the hall cupboard. Carol was handcuffed with her son as the attacker shoved them both into the now emptied cupboard. He demanded money, jewelry, and a VCR. He repeatedly ordered her not to look at him, telling her at one point that he would, quote, cut her eyes out. When he appeared again, he was holding a different wireless hole puncher. This one was shiny. This is the first deviation from the original crime report that she gave. As you and I both know, eyewitness reports typically are goofy at best. In the original report, there was no mention of an actual second gun. He told them then to move into her son's room, where he made them sit on the floor. He then covered them both with a sheet, telling them not to look at him. Otherwise, again, he would cut their eyes out. The man removed the handcuffs from Carol after putting her son back into the cupboard, took her to her bedroom. There are slight discrepancies in the court documents after this. And he subsequently tied her hands with pantyhose behind her back. He then pushed her on the bed, covered her head with a pillow, and screamed at her and pounded on her back with a fist. Twice he left the room and came back. When he returned the second time, he removed the pillow, told her to lie on her back on the bed. Her hands were still tied behind her back at this point. He ripped open the front of her nightgown, removed her clothes. She told him that she was on her period and had an active infection. He threatened to unalive her, took off his jacket, unzipped his pants, and proceeded to violate her. I put front and back. As I've stated before, I'm not going into specifics because this is not that kind of podcast. During this whole ordeal, Carol stated her attacker did not put down the wireless hole puncher, and it was unclear of which hole puncher she saw, as she had conflicting accounts of which one was where. After this, she spoke to her attacker for about 15 to 20 minutes in a very calm demeanor. To her credit, she must have been terrified and in pain, but this is what the police documents state. The man brought Carol a robe because she was cold. He untied the pantyhose on her left wrist and later removed it altogether. He tried to tie her ankles with a telephone cord. The man said to her, "I don't know why I'm letting you live. I've killed people before." He told Carol to tell the police he wore a mask. He then brought her son to the bedroom, handcuffed them both to the bed. He left the handcuff keys on the mantle and told Carol to make sure her daughter found them. In Carol's opinion, the man seemed confused, asking for the name of the town and directions to the freeway. When the man left, Carol thought his car sounded like a big, older car. Carol's son called 911, and the police arrived within a few minutes after the original phone call. Again, there's slight differences between her telling and the court documents, but all of the interviews that she had, there were subsequent interviews. There were a lot. So he fled the scene after retrieving the child from the closet and binding the two together again with the handcuffs. So let me just send you 2 screenshots regarding the case. Okay. So this is from the actual case documents. So after all of this, it would be 1 month before he struck again. So July 2nd, 1985, we have our 13th victim, 75-year-old Mary Louise Camus Cannon. She was a widowed grandmother and was born December 16th, 1909 in Downey, Los Angeles. Her father, Joseph Camus, was 42, and her mother, Berthe Navarrete, was 27. She later married Darrell Frank Cannon. Sweet. January 2nd, 1940 in Clark, Nevada. Not sweet for the victim. Sweet because I just got a message from the landscaper saying when he was coming. So she lived in Norwalk, which is a suburb of LA. And 1 month and 3 days later, on the night of July 2nd, Ricky drove a stolen car to Arcadia and randomly selected the house of Mary Cannon. After quietly entering her home, he found her asleep in her bedroom. He bludgeoned her into unconsciousness with a lamp and then knifed her to unaliving with a kitchen knife, a butcher knife in the kitchen. He repeatedly connived her body until she was completely dead. After the police determined the attacks around the city were likely all by one assailant, they started looking into similar cases around the same period. One case that raised alarms with Detective Carrillo and Detective Salerno was an attempted abduction near Eagle Rock, which is a neighborhood in the northeast of LA. The victim police would describe as a young female fought off a would-be attacker who drove away in a Toyota. Moments later, the officer spotted the Toyota committing a traffic violation. After he was pulled over, the suspect escaped on foot, leaving the car behind. Before he ran, he drew a pentagram into the dust on the windshield. Detectives Carrillo and Salerno tracked down the stolen Toyota to a nearby impound lot. They requested to print the car, but they couldn't access the vehicle for weeks. In the meantime, the cornflake unaliver was still on the loose, and the clock was ticking at this point because the detectives were like, how many more victims? July 5th, 1985, we have our 14th victim, Whitney Bennett. She is one of the living survivors that went through the whole ordeal and actually lived after he left her for dead. She's been on dozens of podcasts, which I listed earlier. 3 nights later, Ramirez broke into a Sierra Madre home and bludgeoned 16-year-old Whitney Bennett with a tire iron as she slept. For those who don't know, your head wounds bleed more than other wounds on your body, unless it's a wound, middle finger, or a main vein, in which case it's an arterial spread and you'll die in like seconds. So ask me how I know. So after searching in vain for a knife in the kitchen, Ricky tried to throat hug her with a telephone cord. He stated that he was startled to see electrical sparks emanate from the cord. And when the victim began to breathe, he fled the house believing that Jesus Christ had intervened to save her. So he essentially had unalived her and then brought her back because it started sparking. As Whitney yelled for her parents, they found her badly beaten and bleeding. Ricky had left behind a tire iron and a clear, bloody footprint in her bedroom. Whitney survived the attack, but required nearly 500 stitches to close a severe scalp laceration and underwent cosmetic surgery, but ultimately made a full recovery from all of her injuries. So July 6th, the detectives finally got their hands on the stolen Toyota. They weren't able to recover any fingerprints, but there was still one clue left inside, a business card for a local dentist in Chinatown. Police paid a visit to that dentist office and discovered their suspect had just visited 5 days earlier on July 1st. The dentist gave the police x-ray scans that showed an impacted tooth. Police efforts to intercept the cornflake unaliver at the dentist office were unsuccessful. They waited at the dentist office to see if he would show up, and he didn't. A few days later, July 7th, 1985, meet 60-year-old Joyce Lucille Brown Nelson. Born August 3rd, 1924 in Redlands, San Bernardino County. That evening, Ricky burglarized the home of Joyce, who lived in Monterey Park. Finding her asleep in her living room couch, he bludgeoned her to unaliving and subsequently stomped on her. A shoe print from an Avia sneaker was left imprinted on her face. After cruising to other neighborhoods, he returned to Monterey Park and chose the home same night as Sophie Dickerman, age 63. Sophie Dickerman, born October 22nd, 1921, survived her ordeal with Ricky and officially passed away in 2004. She was the second known living victim. Ricky assaulted and handcuffed Sophie at gunpoint, attempted to grape her, and stole her jewelry. When she swore at him that he had taken everything of value, he told her to, quote, swear to Satan. Mind you, I'm not counting Carol Kyle in the quote unquote surviving because he left these women for dead. He left Carol alive. That's why I didn't lump her in with the others. Also, those of you who are wondering, there's nothing wrong with my marriage. My fingers are too fat to fit my wedding ring right now. There's new ones we ordered. Should be here any day. So back to Joyce. Joyce's neighbor, Robert Blanco, noticed the back gate was open at 6 a.m. He goes, this is out of the ordinary. Entered her yard, heard her TV on, and called out for her. There was no response. He checked on her again at 9 a.m. Same result. Nothing had changed. At this point, he had noticed a window screen from the front window lying in her flower bed. The window itself was open. Her front door was also open. The back screen had been cut. He was like, this is sketch. I'm out. Called the cops.
Good for him.
Right. I love when neighbors do something, see something, say something kind of thing. Joyce had been bludgeoned over the head, which was not the immediate cause of her death, and then subsequently throat hugged. She had fought her attacker and sustained a broken nail, severe bruising, and cuts to the face. There was also quite a lot of physical evidence at the scene itself. Partial shoe prints in the planter under the window, a shoe print on her face and robe, palm prints on the bedroom door and windowsill, glove marks on a file box in the other bedroom, and human hair. The media coverage had citizens scared that just about anyone could fall victim to this unknown prowler. Thousands of tips poured in. Thousands of tips poured into the sheriff's hotlines. So July 20th, 1985, 13 days later, Ricky purchased a machete before driving the stolen Toyota to Glendale. Okay? 66-year-old Leela Needing and her husband, 68-year-old Maxon Needing, were our next victims. He burst into the sleeping couple's bedroom and used the machete. I'm going to just say that. He then used a wireless hole puncher and pew-pewed both of them in the head. They were already unalived at this point. He further mutilated their bodies with the machete before robbing the house values. Quickly after selling the stolen items, he then broke into the Sun Valley, Los Angeles home of the Kavanagh family. Somid Kavanagh was born in 1955 in Thailand. She was married to Chanarong Kavanagh, who was born October 24th, 1952 in Thailand. He wirelessly hole punched 32-year-old Chanarong Kavanagh in the head with a wireless hole puncher, unaliving him, and then repeatedly violated and abused Somkid. Then he bound the couple's 8-year-old son before dragging Somkid around the house to reveal the location of all the valuable items. He stole all of it and then proceeded to violate their son. During his assault, he demanded she and her son swear to Satan that she was not hiding any money from him. A couple of days later, on August 6th of 1985, we have 30-year-old Chris Peterson and 27-year-old Virginia Peterson. Oh my God. Rachel!
What you want me to do? I'm not there.
I don't know. My computer's possessed.
I mean, you're possessed, but, I don't say anything rude about that.
Excuse me. It happened one time. One time. All right. Anyways, this is a picture of their home. It's a modest home. Okay. Ricky drove to Northridge, broke into the home of the Petersons. He crept into the bedroom and startled Virginia and wirelessly hole punched her in the face with a .25 caliber wireless hole puncher. He then shot Chris in the neck with the same hole puncher and attempted to flee. Chris fought back, avoiding being hit by 2 more pew-pews during the struggle before Ricky managed to escape. The couple survived their injuries. He's like, this is too much. I got to get out, and just ran. So 2 days later, we have 35-year-old Elias Abouath and his 27-year-old wife, Sakina Abouath. Elias was born October 19th, 1949 in Karachi, Pakistan. And Sakina was originally born Sakina Simji, and she was born June 4th, 1957 in Burma. 2 nights later, Ricky drove the stolen car to Diamond Bar and chose the home of the Abouaths. Sometime after 2:30 a.m., he entered the house and went to the master bedroom. He instantly unalived Elias with a wireless hole puncher. He handcuffed and abused Sakina while forcing to reveal the locations of the jewelry and then violated her. He repeatedly demanded that she swear to Satan so she would not scream during the assaults. When the couple's 3-year-old son entered the bedroom, he tied the child up and continued to violate Sakina. After he left the house, she untied her son and sent him to the neighbors to help. Ricky, who had been closely following the news coverage of his crimes, left LA and headed to San Francisco. 66-year-old Peter Huntsey Pan, yes, his name is Peter Pan, and his wife, 62-year-old Barbara Chow Pan, were the next victims. 10 days later, April 18th, 1985, Peter Pan, born July 10th, 1914 in Shanghai, China, and Barbara Pan, born June 10th, 1921 in Shanghai. She later died at the age of 78 on April 23rd of 2000. Ricky entered the home of the Pans. He used the wireless hole puncher on Peter in the temple, this time changing to a .25 caliber. So he's been using a .22 this entire time. So he changed guns. Peter was unalived instantly. He bludgeoned and violated Barbara before shooting her with the wireless hole puncher and leaving her for dead. Right side, she ultimately survived her injuries. At the crime scene, Ricky used red lipstick to scrawl a pentagram and the phrase, "Jack the Knife," on the bedroom wall. He again left a shoe print at the scene that detectives discovered and matched to the specific pair of avia shoes that was not common at the time. The satanic symbol was also carved into a wall, and Glendale police asked for ballistics information on the shell casings at the scene. As it turned out, the bullets matched the ones found at the Northridge and Diamond Bar attacks. Then Mayor of San Francisco, Dianne Feinstein, I met her, very nice woman, gave a press conference shortly after the Pan unalivings. She publicly revealed for the first time that police had tied the cases together with shell casings and the avia shoe print. Mind you, he's not in custody. So she's putting this out there that they have this evidence.
They have the evidence, but do nothing with it.
Well, it's not that. This is why you don't tell somebody we're looking for a bearded man that looks like this, that looks like this. Because then they can just shave the beard off and dye their hair.
That's fair.
You don't say we have the shoe print evidence for these avia shoes. They're going to get rid of the shoes and get new shoes.
I mean, Criminal Minds show wasn't a thing back then, so.
Very true. Very true. So August 24th, 1985, Ricky traveled 76 miles or 120 kilometers south of LA in a stolen orange Toyota to Mission Viejo. Then we have James Romero Jr. and James Romero III. Nothing happened to them. I'm bringing them up because This is where it gets all sorts of forked, you know? That night, he arrived at the home of 45-year-old James Ramirez Jr., who had just returned from a family vacation to Rosarita Beach in Mexico. James's son, 13-year-old James Ramirez III, was awake. While his family was asleep, James went outside the house to retrieve a pillow he had left inside the truck, which was locked. When he was outside, he heard a rustling noise. Assuming it was an animal, James went to investigate but did not notice anything out of the ordinary. James went into the garage and began working on his mini bike before hearing Ricky's footsteps outside the house. Thinking there was a prowler, James, after observing Ricky through the bedroom window, went to wake his parents, and Ricky fled the scene. James raced outside and noted the color, make, and style of the car, as well as a partial license plate number. James Ramirez Jr. contacted the police with this information, believing James had chased away a thief. When the attack of the Ramirez family residence aborted, Ricky broke into the home of 30-year-old Bill Carnes and his fiancée, 29-year-old Inez Erickson, through the back door. Ramirez entered the sleeping couple's bedroom that awakened Carnes when he cocked the .25 caliber wireless hole puncher. He had pew-pewed Bill 3 times in the head before turning his attention to Inez. Ricky identified himself as the Night Stalker and forced her to swear that she loved Satan, and then he bludgeoned her with his fists and bound her with neckties that he found in the closet. After stealing what he could find, Ramirez dragged Inez to another room before violating her. He demanded cash and jewelry and made her swear on Satan, but there was no more. Before leaving her home, he told Inez, "Tell him the Night Stalker was here." She untied herself and went to a neighbor's house for help. Surgeons removed 2 of the 3 bullets from Bill's head, and he survived his injuries. Talk about traumatic.
Take a moment with our team as we pay tribute to the victims of this ruthless assailant. please join us in a moment of silence as we honor the victims.
I hit the button. So, did you hear me say about the California fingerprint system?
No.
So back then, the California fingerprint system was not yet automated. Police needed a suspect to compare the prints from the stolen car. So police followed other leads to track down a man known as the Night Stalker. Los Angeles detectives followed a tip from a local woman whose father believed he had befriended the cornflake unaliver. He told police about a man from El Paso, Texas, who went by the name Rick. A man who openly bragged about his still confidential information about the Night Stalker unalivings. Meanwhile, San Francisco police were also chasing down a lead surrounding a Rick from El Paso. Trail of clues involving a stolen bracelet led them to a man named Armando Rodriguez, a friend of Ricky's. Armando was the one who told them about the Night Stalker's name being Richard Ramirez. There were 8 people named Richard Ramirez with fingerprints and police records, and one was a perfect match.
Of course, it was the only one. Are you out of water?
It's okay, because if I try to get up, I'm going to have to run to the bathroom. So,
That's fair.
anytime I stand, this baby just puts all of its weight on my bladder. So, we're going to wait. Salerno and Carrillo, the detectives I talked about earlier, they contacted the manufacturers of the Avia shoes, and they were able to retrieve the soles. Upon the discovery of the make and distribution across the United States, only 6 of them existed in size 11 and a half. 6 out of the entire United States. With 5 of them shipped to locations in Arizona and 1 shipped to a shoe store in LA, it was evident that the one pair in that one size belonged to the actual cornflake unaliver. When it was discovered that the ballistics and the shoe print evidence from the LA crime scenes matched the Peter Pan and Barbara Pan crime scene, San Francisco's mayor, Dianne Feinstein, divulged all of that information, including the gun's caliber, in a televised event. This leak infuriated detectives, as they knew the killer would be following the news coverage and gave him an opportunity to destroy the evidence. Ricky, who was indeed watching the press, dropped his sneakers over the side of the Golden Gate Bridge that very night. He remained in the area for a few more days before heading back to the LA area. I said she was a nice lady, but not a lot of lights on upstairs.
It was like, I see your mouth moving, but I hear nothing.
Your mouth's moving, but nothing coming out.
Pretty much.
Back to Inez. She gave a detailed description of her assailant to investigators, and police obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. The stolen Toyota was found abandoned on August 28th in Koreatown, and police obtained a single fingerprint from the rear view mirror. Despite Ricky's careful efforts to wipe down the entire car, the print was positively identified as belonging to Ricky Ramirez, and he was described as a drifter from Texas by police. He had a long rap sheet that included many arrests for traffic and illicit violations regarding opiates. The identification of Ricky's print was described as a, quote, near miracle, as the system used to identify him was recently installed, as well as the fact that the system contained fingerprints of criminals only born after July 1st, 1960, which was 2 months before Ricky was born. August 29th, 85, law enforcement officials decided to release a mugshot of good old Ricky. At the press conference, it was announced, "We know who you are, and soon everyone else will. There will be no place you can hide." August 30th, Ricky was on the front page of the Los Angeles Herald. His name and photo were all over the news. Ricky didn't know it yet, though. Ricky took a bus to Tucson, Arizona to visit his brother, unaware that he had become the lead story in virtually every major newspaper and television program across California. After failing to meet his brother due to his brother not being home, he returned to LA on the early morning of the 31st. He walked past cops who were staking out a bus terminal in hopes of catching the killer leaving on an outbound bus. So he was leaving an inbound bus. Girl, as soon as Ricky started running, people recognized him from the newspapers. He sprinted across the Fry Freeway. Listen, that is 6 lanes on either side. No, ma'am. I was like, he sprinted across the Fry Freeway?
Man, also, different time.
It doesn't matter. The 5 freeway is so dangerous. It was still 6 lanes back then. 6 lanes on one side and 6 lanes on the other.
Like, time of day makes a difference? I have no clue. I'm taking your word for all of this.
Just like New York, LA never sleeps. When you get to Anaheim or like the Grapevine, it's a little more quiet in that area. But what do I have? Oh, CeraVe. I love CeraVe. I'm sorry. It is my cream of choice.
Not sponsored.
Not sponsored. If you would like to sponsor me, and Rachel, let us know. So he sprinted across the 5 freeway to Boyle Heights, where he unsuccessfully tried to carjack Faustino Pinon. After noticing a group of elderly Hispanic women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, also known as the killer, Ramirez saw his face on the front page of the newspaper on La Opinion, which was a notably really popular Spanish newspaper at the time, with the headline calling him Invasor Nocturno, also known as the Night Invader, and he fled the store in a panic. After running across the Santa Ana freeway, he attempted to carjack an unlocked Ford Mustang, but was pulled out by the angry residents Faustino Pinon and Jose Bernion. Ricky ran across the street and attempted to take car keys from Angelina de la Torre. He screamed at her in Spanish to give him the keys. She refused. Her husband, Manuel, witnessed the attempt and struck Ramirez over the head with a fence post. A group of over 10 residents, including Jose's sons, formed and chased Ricky down Hubbard Street and Boyle Heights. They restrained Ramirez and continued to abuse him and beat him. Around 8 a.m., police were called over a disturbance in the area with a few other details. Police arrived on Hubbard Street and took a severely beaten Ramirez into custody. According to local police, who first responded to, quote, reports of a fight in the area, the crowd was waving and pointing at the newspaper, saying that the man they were detaining was indeed the Night Stalker. Shortly after Ramirez was apprehended, he claimed to the police, "It's me!" At this point, little doubt remained that Ramirez was the one behind the Night Stalker attacks.
It's me, Jessica.
It's me, Jessica.
Sorry, continue.
No, it's fine. I've never seen that movie, but because of that stupid meme and hearing that audio, anytime Josh says it's me, I automatically go, Jessica. So this was all on August 31st, 1985. Bled over to September 1st, okay? July 22nd, 1988 was the next time, because he had been in jail for 3 years at this point. Jury selection for his trial just began. 3 years after he had been incarcerated. At his first court appearance, he raised his hand with the pentagram drawn in the center, and he yelled, "Hail Satan." August 3rd, the LA Times reported that some jail employees overheard Ricky planning to, quote, pew pew the prosecutor with a wireless hole puncher, which he intended to have smuggled into the courtroom. Consequently, a metal detector was installed outside, and intensive searches were conducted on all people entering. The 14th, the trial was interrupted because one of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, did not arrive at the courtroom. Later that day, she was found pew-pewed with a wireless hole puncher in her apartment. The jury was terrified, understandably so, because they were wondering if Ricky had somehow directed this event and thought maybe he had planned something inside his prison cell, whether or not he could reach any of the jurors. However, it was ultimately determined that he was not responsible for her death, as she was pew-pewed and unalived by her boyfriend, who later committed suicide with the same weapon in a hotel. The alternate juror who replaced her was too frightened to even return to her home. September 20th, 1989, Ricky was convicted of 43 total charges. Are you ready? Yes. Ricky was convicted of 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, 5 attempted schmurders, 11 schmexual assaults, and 14 burglaries. During the penalty phase of the trial on November 7th, 1989, he was sentenced to unalive in California's gas chamber. He stated to reporters after his sentence, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory. See you in Disneyland."
What kind of Disneyland he's going to, but he won't be having any fun.
Nope. The trial cost $1.8 million, which at the time made it the most expensive murder trial in the history of California, until it was surpassed by the O.J. Simpson case in 1994. While awaiting trial, Ricky reportedly met actor Sean Penn. Sean Penn was jailed for 33 days in 1987 for reckless driving and assault of an extra while on the set of the film Colors. He claimed to receive a letter from Ricky as a fellow inmate. Okay, it's now done. I gotta write down, he's now done kicking. 25 minutes of kicking. That's not bad. To which he wrote back, Sean Penn, wrote back to Ricky stating he had no sympathy and hope he died in the gas chamber. At the time of his trial, Ricky had fans who were writing him letters and paying him visits. Beginning in 1985, Doreen Leroy. Loy? It's not Leroy. I can speak. Doreen Loy wrote Ricky nearly 75 letters during his entire incarceration. Ricky proposed to Doreen in 1988. In October 3rd, 1996, they were married in California's San Quentin State Prison. I used to live by San Quentin State Prison. It is a scary stretch of highway. There is water over here and miles of nowhere over here. And lots of signs on the freeway that says, "Don't pick up hitchhikers." Anyways, for many years after Ricky's death, Loy stated that she would commit suicide when Ricky was executed. By the time of his death in 2013, Ramirez was engaged to a 23-year-old writer along with Doreen. August 7th, 2006, his first round of state appeals ended unsuccessfully when California upheld his convictions and subsequent sentence. September 7th, the Supreme Court denied his request for a rehearing, and he had additional appeals pending until the time of his unaliving. 2009, when the original DNA story broke about the handkerchief, detectives claimed that Ramirez lived on a street a residential hotel on the street behind O'Farrell Street, which was known as the Ellis Street Hotel. Their evidence was supported by a medical record giving that address, as well as the Mason Street, which runs perpendicular to O'Farrell and Ellis. Of course, this means nothing. The Tenderloin is densely populated with a high crime rate. Very true. Even if they could prove he once resided there, it is not enough to prove unalive, the child who was unalived. And it just seems like this is, like any of the other cases, a nebulous suspect and a story that seemed to be sensationalized and embellished. June 7, 2013, Ricky died of complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma at Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California. He was the age of 53. He was also affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. His body was not claimed, so it was cremated. Good for him. 2016, officials disclosed evidence of a second subject. Officials disclosed evidence of a second subject, identified through another DNA sample retrieved from the scene, who is believed to be present at Mae Young's unaliving. Authorities had not publicly identified the suspect, described as being a juvenile at the time, and have not brought charges due to lack of evidence. Of course, we have the last piece that we do at the end of every show, the media. So, there is a song by Sunkill, which was written in 2013, called Richard Ramirez Died Today of Natural Causes, dealing with cultural and personal impact of Ricky Ramirez's unsensational death relative to the fear of his activity and the Night Stalker cases. Night Stalker, The Hunt for the Serial Killer documentary I told you about earlier on Netflix, featuring first-person interviews, archival footage, and newly shot reenactments and original photography related to the scene. So the actual crime scene photos, I watched it, and I should not have watched that when Josh was in the field. Oh my God. Next, we have Serial Killer Capital, Los Angeles, features segments on Ricky's crimes, and book called The Night Stalker, Life and Crimes of Richard Ramirez, published in 1991 by Philip Carlo. It is a detailed biography based on interviews with Ricky himself. And that is Richard Ramirez.
I hated all of it until the end when he became deceased.
The fact that I could do 21 pages in 1 hour and 45 minutes. I'm good.
You did absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. I hated researching this case.
I'd imagine so. I would have hated it too. Thank you for taking it.
You are so welcome. I have no closing remarks aside from I hated it. I think the next episode will be a lot better.
I sure hope so.
Anyways, as always, stay feral.
Bite the hand.
And we'll see you guys next time. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Well, party possums, that's today's dose of the Pandemonium. Thanks for listening and watching the AudiHD chaos. Review, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Tune in next week for more continued madness. And as always, stay feral.